Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Shadow of the Vampire, starring John Malkovich, Willem Dafoe, Udo Kier, Carrie Elways, Catherine McCormick, and Eddie Izzard, directed by E. Elias Merhige. Now, I have not seen this movie until this past year. I watched it earlier this last year when before the new Nosferatu movie came out. And what's hilarious is Willem Dafoe showed up in the new Nosferatu, and he shows up here as playing the guy that originally played the vampire in the 1922 Nosferatu movie. So I remember this movie being pretty good, but how good was it? Let's get into the movie. We After we get 6 minutes of opening credits, the movie takes place in Berlin in the year 1921, where a director named Friedrich Wilhelm Murnau, or as I'm going to call him Murnau for the rest of the show, played by John Malkovich, can't call the movie under Bram Stoker's novel Dracula, so instead he calls it Nosferatu, as he refuses to sell the rights to his novel to changes the name Count Dracula to Count Orlok. And we start the movie with Murnau, as I'm going to call him for the rest of the show, like I said, as he films the actress who plays Ellen in the 1922 movie Greta Schroeder, played by Catherine McCormick, as his assistant Adrian Grau, played by Udo Kier, and Murnau is here also, and Murnau is anxious to get his cast and crew on the train to England, and this opening scene was good, but slow. As the pacing in the beginning was slow, but it works well for the movie. Murnau is introduced to the character actor Max Schreck, played by Willem Dafoe, who will play the vampire in the movie as they get on the train. And the cast and crew arrive to England, and they arrive to where they stay as Murnau wants to film the scene at nighttime, and people in the crew get freaked the fuck out. And they start filming when we see Willem Dafoe as the vampire. The makeup was great in this movie as he looked like the vampire. As for the performance, Willem Dafoe does a great job as the character portraying the vampire Nosferatu from 1922. Murnau is filming a scene until a native comes in the shot, and he gets bothered by the fact they're filming a vampire movie as they continue filming at night, and we get the actor playing Thomas named Gustav von Wangerham, or Heim, played by Eddie Izzard, as he's been in so many movies I reviewed him in, like the later Ocean's 11 sequels, to Cars 2, to the Lego Batman movie, but where I mostly know him is from that movie Mystery Men, which is where I primarily know him from. And they filmed the scene where they meet Count Orlok in the 1922 Nosferatu movie as they wrap up filming for the night. And there were times the movie was hard to see, but remember, they're filming nighttime scenes, and it made it hard to see the movie sometimes. But honestly, it's not as hard to see as an Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. And Murnau introduces Max or Count Orlok to the rest of the cast and crew. And I like the characters, as the others are not great, as Willem Dafoe is. And before he made the 2002 Spider-Man movie, this is where I knew Willem Dafoe from, as he would creep me out as this vampire, as I didn't see this movie until almost a year ago, and he pulls off creepy perfectly. Great job, Mr. Dafoe. Let's hear it from him. The cast and crew filmed the scene without makeup on Max, and Max almost screws up the scene, but he delivers the performance as he's taken the role of Count Orlok too seriously, as they film another scene in the movie with Gustav, and they film the scene where Thomas cut the bread towards himself, and he cuts himself, and Max drinks Gustav's blood and screws up the scene. Like I said, Max takes the role too seriously, as he goes a little too far. Excuse me. And Willem Dafoe has the great sound of the menace while playing the vampire perfectly. Max watches some images of the movie while the crew takes Gustav to the hospital, while Murnau is about as he tells Henrik Galeen the studio hates his script and he yells at Max about how he screwed up the scene because he has to find another photographer. And John Malkovich does pull off a German accent well enough, as Max explains he can't go on to sea, as he will have to or else know Greta. And I feel like Max is obsessed with her for some reason at all, as the movie doesn't explain why, and we move on to how Murnau has to deal with Max being a little difficult to work with, as he overhears Murnau talking with Albin, as Max jumps in to have a drink with them and explains what happened in the Bram Stoker book, as Dracula had no assistant, which was an interesting scene for a 90-minute biopic, which reminds me of the biopics of Hitchcock and The Girl, as they were both 90 minutes and biopics about filming a movie. Max eats a bat right out of the blue, as the new photographer named Fritz Arno Wagner, played by Carrie Elways, come from The Princess Bride, arrives to England as he brings a gun on to the set to keep the actress pulled together, and Fritz meets Max while sitting in a coffin, as the scene was pretty good, as I get the impression Max doesn't like Fritz, as that's good directed by E. Elias Merhige. Greta talks with the crew as she meets Fritz after all these years, as she used to give her treats while Murnau visits Max and about Greta as she arrives, and he says to him he's going to stay away from her as Murnau attacks Max, and that's where harassment gone wrong. Excuse me. And Greta, Fritz, Albin, and Henrik talk about Max behind his back, particularly about how he's a fucking vampire and he ate a bat while he was drunk. And we move on to Greta having a nightmare about the vampire himself, as Max tries to sneak around and visit Greta while having the nightmare, but he gets caught and makes a weird face, as this movie gets a little weird for me. Murnau believes he's ruined, as he'll never make another picture again, as daytime comes and Albin and Fritz barge into Murnau's room and says he's not Max. And he says something, as he says he played an actor playing a role and he wants him to get Greta, as that was the agreement between Murnau and Max, as Albin covers Murnau into bed, as Fritz tries to get Murnau home, but he can't find a way home, and they don't have a choice but to film the scene between Max and Greta, that very night, which comes with Max meeting Greta as he's creeping her out, and I'm a little freaked out by the looks of Willem Dafoe in general, and Murnau is giving a stake to defend herself against the vampire with. And they filmed that scene in the end of the 1922 Nosferatu movie, with Greta is being afraid of Max, as Murnau puts a needle to her to calm Greta down, and they filmed the scene where he dies at the end of the 1922 movie first, and they filmed the scene that scares the hell out of the audience of the 1922 movie, where he feeds on Greta or Ellen in the movie as he continues to feed himself upon her, and they take a break as Greta snores rather loudly as Max is feeling her sleeping, and we move on to Max threatening Murnau as he disagrees with the bargain, and Fritz tries to kill Max as Max beats up both Fritz and Albin and finishes filming the scene, and he finishes the scene as the movie ends, and the climax was entertaining, as was this movie. But entertained was I? Let's get to the rating and find out, shall we? I'll give this movie a 6.9 out of 10. The pacing was slow in the beginning, but it will eventually get good when they film the picture in the movie they're making back in 1921. As Willem Dafoe is great in this movie as the man who portrayed the original vampire, as this was where I knew him before he was ever the Green Goblin in the 2002 Spider-Man movie. Despite I didn't see until last year, and sometimes when the movie was shot at night, it was a little hard to see, but not as hard as, say, Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, but it pulls off filming the horror in that movie perfectly. The makeup is tremendous at making Willem Dafoe pulling off a vampire perfectly, as John Malkovich pulls off a German accent well, enough, as there are problems with it, like we never learn how Max is obsessed with Greta to begin with, and the darkness, which I brought up a second ago, which is makes interesting choices for a 90-minute biopic about filming a movie, which felt like the biopic of Hitchcock and The Girl, both of them about Alfred Hitchcock, which were both 90 minutes about filming movies. And I did enjoy myself watching the movie, as it was a little entertaining, as I was pretty entertained throughout the movie. And this movie works as it's a recommendation for as it works for a biopic of how Nosferatu came to life, thanks to Murnau, and it was good directed by E. Elias Merhige, as he does get a good job. He does a good job with the movie, but at the end of the day, this movie was fucking weird. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this whole Dracula Nosferatu retrospective, as well as including this after the remake of Nosferatu at 2024. And until we ever get another Nosferatu or Dracula, I am a vampire and I will suck your blood.